Okay, we're on YouTube now. Yeah, we should probably wait for a couple of more minutes, but anyway, we'll start. We'll start in a few minutes, I guess. 3 or 4 minutes, Arshad?
Yeah, I think we should wait for a bit for others to join.
That's it. Yeah, we're live on YouTube now as well.
Wait. Okay, we're on YouTube.
So Munib, my suggestion to you is to keep the window where you have this open, just keep it on mute. Otherwise, we'll keep hearing ourselves again and again.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Assalam, welcome, Batsab.
Hello, क्या हाल है? ठीक है? Ready to go?
Yeah, almost. We're just waiting for a few more to join, so we can start. I think once we start, we will not be able to stop Omar. I think that's the thing. You know, you need to be absolutely sure that you allow him to start. Otherwise,
it's only this is like a train. It starts going and it's going. Nobody's stopping it.
Thank you, Osama. Good to see you too. Zulfikar, sir, thank you very much for that. I think the two legends you're talking about are Batsab and Mr. Omar, right?
I doubt that. How's it going in Bahrain, Arshad?
Bahrain has been so far a bit slow in terms of reopening, unlike Dubai. But we are getting there. You know, I heard that all the extreme ends, the mosques and the clubs are open in Dubai, but Bahrain is taking very, very sort of cautious measures of just doing it fairly slowly compared to others in the world. Rightly or wrongly, I don't know, but
yeah, I guess rightly or wrongly, we'll all find out. You know, depending on how this thing goes. But yeah, I mean, I guess Dubai is pretty much. I mean, everybody's. It doesn't seem like, you know, there is. If you go out and other than the fact that people are wearing masks, there's not really much of a difference between, you know, where we were in February or March as opposed to now. But to be fair, I think people are taking precautions. There has been, you know, a lot of, you know, kind of, you know, people paying, you know, you have a mask, I think compliance rate maybe 95, 98%, as opposed to maybe other places, even in North America, where the compliance rate is much lower. So that's why I guess other countries are kind of hesitant to open fully, as opposed to Dubai and the UAE. Even, I mean, look, Abu Dhabi is different as well. Abu Dhabi hasn't even opened, really.
Yeah, I think not sure, as I said, what's right, what's wrong, but yeah, it's pretty slow. But I think commercial units are fully up and running, except for few. But yeah, business is not back to normal as yet. Majority of Bahrain's business is linked with Saudi, so
yeah.
Until and unless Saudi opens up, business will remain slow.
Moin bhai.
Guys who just joined us on the call, we are just waiting for a couple of minutes, although it's just 6 o'clock, but we have to give some time to our colleagues to join. We have a large number of registrations. I know this is the time of the day where people are just closing up from their work, either on the way back home or at home, just trying to wrap up things. So hopefully they will join in few minutes. So we will kick off in 2 minutes. Just give exactly 2 minutes, Umar. I know you run by the clock when these sessions happen.
Well, I mean, look, I charge by the hour, so we'll see how it goes.
we
Assalamualaikum,
have
Arshad.
seen.
Hello, Umar. Looking nice, huh, Arshad? Looking smart and crisp. Umar, you too. This is Muzammil.
Thank you, Muzammil. Much appreciated.
Muzammil is not turning on the camera because he's not looking sharp and.
Yeah, I just had a swim, so I'm not looking sharp and crisp like you two guys. So.
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, when people don't turn on their cameras, then it actually kind of works out better in the sense that when you go on YouTube, then it's just the two of us showing. It works out better. So unless we've got somebody who's really wants to be on YouTube, then you can show your camera. It'll be just the three of us then. But this works out well.
Yeah.
Great. I think perhaps we can kick off with your permission, Omar.
Sure, let's go.
Okay, so I'll do a few thank yous and what this session is about, and then introduce you again. Although I wrote a very long message about you, I think it was just never-ending. Lot of achievements and accolades you had.
I hope nobody believed a thing. I hope nobody believed a thing.
So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. This is an ICAP Bahrain member of ICAP chapters event. I am the current chair of that chapter, and we are trying to organize n number of webinars. We have picked up technical topics. We have number of contributors from the industry as well as from practice. We wanted to do something more in terms of soft skills. That's why Umar is here. I'll introduce him in a bit. So we try to run these seminars on a very regular basis. The next one, which we are planning for, is little bit of technical, and one more which is coming up is digital transformation as a driver for growth. We will be announcing that very shortly. Coming to this session, we have Umar Hayat here. He has been in this world of talking to people, motivating them, encouraging them.
Since I was born. Since I was born.
Like since you were born, like I was about to say 13 years ago. So I think that goes to show that you're very, very young. So I think Umar has been doing this for ages, and I have attended n number of seminars which he has conducted. Really insightful, and you will enjoy that. Umar, I think I will leave the rest of the introduction on you. So please, the floor is yours. Please start and tell us more about leadership under crisis.
Well, thank you so much, Arshad, and the Bahrain chapter of ICAP. Thank you so much, guys, for putting this together. Learning and development, I guess it's an ongoing process. So there's never a time where somebody can say, I know now what I need to know. It's an ongoing process. Again, my request to you is if you guys are not speaking, then perhaps the best thing to do would be to turn your cameras off. Typically, I do ask people to keep their cameras on, but for this session, because when we are live on YouTube, which we are, then we're able to see multiple faces, and it just seems a little bit awkward. But now it'll just be Arshad and myself. And of course, if you at some point want to say something, speak up, then please, of course, open your camera so we can have you join us on YouTube as well. So look, we've got about 45 minutes or so, Arshad, if that's okay with you. I just wanted to, and we'll open up the last few minutes for any questions that people might have. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. My name is Umar Hayat. I've had the privilege and pleasure of running several of these webinars and sessions since our world turned upside down a few months ago. And since then, it's actually been about learning and kind of relearning how business is done, and what are some of the things that are working for people, what are some of the things that we should be taking advantage of, and I wanted to start in that kind of tone and discuss with you. And look, we've got some professionals with us as well. We've got maybe collectively, I don't know, with 30 odd people on the call. So maybe we've got, a few thousand years of leadership experience on this in this call. May I quickly please ask you in the chat box if you'd like to engage with us, because we'd like to make this session interactive and not just me speaking and you listening. May I please ask you in the chat box right now, in the past 4 months or 5 months since we've been going through this coronavirus pandemic and so on, what's been the biggest change that you've experienced in your professional life? I'm not talking about personal life, of course, wearing masks and not being able to touch people, which is probably a good thing. But anyway, would you mind in the chat box quickly sharing with us? Love to hear from you, your thoughts as well. From a professional perspective, what's been the biggest change that you've experienced in your day-to-day work? And I'll give you my 2 cents as well, but I'd love to hear from you. What have been some of the changes that you've experienced? Of course, a lot of people have gone digital. So this digital transformation, this digital warfare that people used to speak about, the virtual cliff that a lot of people used to speak about, that's finally here. I should, of course, saying working from home, that's been a big change, and a lot of us realizing really that a lot of things that we thought we had to do. So people woke up in the morning, got dressed, took the elevator down, probably sat in traffic for half an hour, took a half an hour elevator to go up, sat down to work, and then in the evening they repeated that again. Maybe many of these things were unnecessary. Muzammil saying there's a huge overlap between work and personal life, and we're doing more meetings, and with the sudden shift to meeting all associates virtually. So of course, the digital transformation has been a big part of what people have experienced. There's a few things with that we've noticed, right? So number one, I find generally on these calls, people will say, look, I have become more productive, right? So I have actually become more productive, but that has come at the expense of maybe my work-life balance as well. So people spending actually much more time answering emails. So you'll write an email in the morning, then you log in again. By the time you get a reply, it'll be the afternoon. And by the time you reply, then it'll be the evening. So essentially what you get is nonstop working. And obviously now this has been now 4 or 5 months, and we're actually starting to see the impact of this nonstop working on our ability, on human interaction, on people's stress levels. It's interesting. Let me just ask you quickly about stress. I think it'll be a good question to ask our Bahraini friends. Typically, Bahrain, pretty chilled out place, but for those of you who are joining us from Bahrain, love to hear from you in the chat box. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you guys doing in terms of stress level? So 10 being the highest, like I cannot stand this. I don't know why I'm still here. And 1 being I'm as relaxed as I should. I'm as relaxed as somebody can possibly be, right? So quickly, on the Mariam saying 20, that's funny. On a scale of 1 to 10, then 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, how stressed out are you guys these days compared to 4 or 5 months ago? Munib saying 6, Rashid saying 6, Saeed saying 8, Zulfikar saying 10. Somebody writing a long message. Sorry, my apologies. With the amount of messages I can't possibly keep up. So 5s and 6s and 10s, and it seems like there's been a bunch of comments around the higher side, right? See, interesting when people talk about stress. So I wanted to mention this because any change that people have to go through, anytime we have to operate outside our comfort zone, there is a high level of stress involved. For those individuals who are working in stressed out environments, so if you're working with reporting and deadlines and projects and so on, that stress is compounded. Many of you doing meetings with your bosses and with your associates virtually. There's a hormone in our body called oxytocin, and that hormone is the one that gets released whenever you feel warm and fuzzy. So like anytime you do something nice for someone, right? So you open the door for somebody as they're walking in, or you call your parents to tell them how much you love them, or you call your old friend to celebrate their success. That feeling of warmth and fuzziness that you get is from the hormone oxytocin. That oxytocin hormone over years has evolved only to be released in a social setting. So it actually gets released more when you're in a social setting, which unfortunately many of us have not been for many months. So now over 3, 4, 5 months, you're actually starting to see the impact of people are operating under high levels of stress and anxiety. And that has a direct impact on decision making. In one of our earlier calls, I'd mentioned this, but I think it's still relevant for our new listeners and people who are just joining in. Please do not underestimate the importance of what happens to your thinking patterns, to your decision-making patterns when you're exposed to high levels of stress over a long period of time. The other day, I was reading this fantastic article about digital dementia and how many of us, our screen time has gone through the roof. So many of us, maybe Arshad yourself, Arshad, let me ask you, I know you've been working very, very hard over the past 4 or 5 months. What's your screen time like? How many hours a day are you on a laptop, on a call? How many hours a day would you say?
I think definitely gone much above and beyond what I used to be. I think 12 hours minimum a day.
So imagine, right? So this Zulfikar saying 16 hours of screen time. So basically, anytime I'm not sleeping, I'm in front of a screen. And obviously, what that does to our ability to think, think clearly, decision making. We're bombarded now by the amount of decisions and choices we have to make. So I wanted to mention this to you, and I've briefly mentioned it in a call as well. Remember the way the human being, the human psyche was created. We were only supposed to operate under high levels of stress and anxiety for a short period of time, right? So it's like the flight or fight response. I've often said a door was to open, a tiger was to walk in. That's where the flight and fight response kicks in. You make a decision, either you run or you fight or you do something. But when over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we get exposed to these high levels of stress, decision making gets impeded, relationship building gets impeded. So if you are a manager or if you're a leader right now, and you're listening to this, and if you've got a team of 3 or 4 or 5 people that you haven't spent time with, that you haven't coached properly or given feedback to, if not now, then when? Right? This is where servant leadership that Ken Blanchard so articulately wrote about, where kind of the leaders eat last, as Simon Sinek speaks about. This is the time to be able to create that environment and to be able to create that culture. And Arshad, is very interesting. In a few minutes, I'll share with you some tips or some ideas in a few slides that I think leaders should be practicing right now. But it's interesting, Arshad, we're seeing now organizations that had a choice to make. A few months ago, organizations started to make choices, right? Either they could immediately go into that knee-jerk reaction. What's the first resource, Arshad, to get cut? You're in consulting and advising for many years. You're a senior partner with a large accounting firm. And let me ask you, what's the first resource they cut? What's the first thing companies do the moment there's a recession? What's the first knee-jerk reaction?
I think that the frontline staff, the support staff, the admin staff, they just get fired. I think that mostly those people who are actually sitting at the back office staff are the one who take the cull.
So Jenny's saying cost cutting, for example. And let me ask you, Arshad, because I know you have lots of experience in advising and looking at companies' balance sheets. On average, what % of a company's overall cost comes from typical kind of salaries and overheads? What % would you give it compared to the overall cost of running a business? What % on average would come from human resource? Let's say, give me a %, give me a number on average.
Depending on if this is a product business, then that would be like a 20%, less than 20%. But if that is a service business, that is the main cost.
Let's say we take Zulfikar's number, 30%, right? And let's take a number of 30 or 35%. So the moment there is a recession, the moment there is a economic financial crisis, if you look all over the world, Arshad, companies year after year, time after time, make the same mistakes. You know what they do? They end up letting go of those frontliners, the service providers, the salespeople, the kind of the easier target, if I can say that word, and they let them go, right? And the cost saving of that is minimal. And then what happens, Arshad, is that 3-4 months pass, 6 months pass, those companies that survive, which many of them do, they end up going back in the marketplace trying to rehire people, and often they do not get the right talent. And when they do bring in people, they often have to pay them higher salaries because the competition is trying to do the same. So it's the cyclical process that we find ourselves in, and many companies find themselves in, where they go up and down, up and down. And these are magnified, Arshad, in the GCC, in the Gulf countries, because the highs are high and the lows are low. And often the human resource is the least appreciated resource, the cheapest resource, if I can say that. So it's just so easy to let people go, even though you're impacting lives. So empathy, we've often used this word empathy. Now I have a question for you, Arshad. Now let me ask this question to your listeners as well. Very important question. I'd love to get your feedback. So let me ask you, let's say you're in the aviation industry right now. Okay, and let's say it's doom and gloom and nobody's flying and there's cost cut everywhere and it seems like the world is about to end. You've got two choices. Now you have to let me know what choice. If you were a CEO of a hospitality, of a retail, of an aviation company right now, any of the sectors that have been deeply impacted by this crisis, you've got two choices. One choice is you make the decision, you let X% of the workforce go, and then you keep the rest and you hope for better times to come back. And by the way, because since you've lost your best service and your best salespeople, it'll take longer for good times to return. That's one way you can go about it. Or the other way, option B, let's say. So option A is you make the decision, you're the boss, people live and die by the decisions you make. Second option B, is where you call a town hall. You bring people together and say, look, guys, times are tough. I cannot pay you your salaries next month. Things continue the way they're going. Can we make a joint decision, a participative decision, where we can cut back our hours, we can cut back our salaries, we can cut back some of our benefits. So for example, Arshad, if you as a senior leader had all these dental packages and these fancy packages, right? And then exactly, right? But imagine somebody else doesn't. But let's say, Arshad, you don't use these packages because you don't use these benefits because for whatever reason, you're covered by your spousal packages, whatever, right? Imagine you saying, well, look, I'm happy to share these benefits and packages with others. So let me quickly ask you guys in the chat box, let me know if you are the leader of an organization right now, what option would you go with? Would you go with option A, where you are the one making the decision, it's telling people what to do? Or would you go with option B, which is a much more participative approach? You ask people what they think. Somebody still has to make a decision, because remember, in democracy, in times of crisis, it doesn't work either because you've got too many decision makers. So you still have to make a decision, but how would you go about making the decision? So I see a lot of option Bs that people are talking about here. Go ahead, Arshad. Go ahead, man.
I would just add, I think we've gone through the same sort of dilemma, and we chose option C, which was doing this town hall, but then talking about growth opportunities and diverting our attention to what else we can do with the same kind of resources. Of course, it's not that easy for a giant organization like an airline to just completely convert into something else. But then there are definitely, if you start putting your brains together, you will find a way. So I think there is an option C.
Well, interesting, right? Should you speak about that? That's what Emirates Airlines right now is doing, right? They've gone heavily into cargo. In fact, they're flying cargo planes only. They're using planes, removing the seats, taking cargo. They're actually using planes with seats to fly cargo. So all of a sudden, people become more creative and innovative. Nahid says businesses currently are going after money. That are going after money will lose money and people, whereas ultimately with people, money will come back. Now, isn't that the $1 million question? What comes first? Do profits come first or do people come first? I guess I ask you, do profits bring people? So once we'll make money, we'll hire the right people, or do people bring you profits? And this is not the first time this has happened. It's not the last time it's happened, but regularly companies keep making the same mistakes. So I guess, year after year, Arshad, right? I told you, Arshad, my background's from psychology, and we've spent year after year trying to understand what makes companies go beyond the bottom line, right? Arshad, from 1965, the Fortune 500 companies, the biggest 500 companies around at that time, only 11 remain today, right? What happened to these companies, Arshad? What happened to these giants at one time? Right. What happened to these companies is they keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I promise you that what worked in the past will not work in the future, especially when it comes to management styles? Arshad, let me ask you a question. You meet a lot of companies, you meet senior people in companies. What would you say in Bahrain or the GCC in general right now? What percent of the workforce? And let me ask you, and let me ask our friends in the chat box. What percent of your teams right now, for those of you who are managers, or for those of you who are leading companies, what percent of your company or what percent of your team right now are millennials? Millennials meaning people born after 1980, like Arshad
Including
here,
me.
like people again.
I'm also a millennial.
Yeah, sure.
No, I'm
You're,
not joking.
you're millennial twice, buddy. Right, very interesting, right? Can I ask you, what percent of your workforce, what percent of your team right now are millennials? Arshad, what would you say? What's your general feel for the GCC, for the UAE? What percent?
Yeah, in our business, its percentage is high. I think that because we are pretty sort of trying to build up a different kind of brand. But yeah, organizations usually have around sort of 50% now, I think, millennials. So 1980s is 40 years, yeah. So 40-year old.
Yeah, so late 30s, kind of, people, who've been around, kind of. So it's interesting, right? Some of our viewers talking about 100%, 90%, 80%. So that's the biggest change that's happening. So, and I've mentioned this in previous calls as well, but my goodness, I cannot explain this enough. Many of the people right now who are reporting to you or who will be reporting to you grew up in the age of instant information. They grew up in the age of what we call, eclectic behavior, meaning they wanted to choose what they wanted to do. I mentioned this previously as well, Arshad, that when Gallup did a survey where they tracked from 1982 how long a middle manager held on to the same job at the same company, in the early 80s, those numbers were like 5 or 6 years. In 2017 and 18, those numbers had gone down to 1.5 or 1.6 years. So on average, people hold on to the same job in the same company for much shorter periods of time than they did. So no more jobs for life. Let me ask you, Arshan, let me ask our colleagues quickly in the chat box. Love to hear from you guys. Quickly. In your opinion, what do you think is the single biggest reason why we are seeing such high levels of employee attrition, meaning people leaving their employers after a year, 2 years? Why are we seeing such high levels of employee attrition and such low levels of employee engagement? Arshad, what do you think as our friends and colleagues answer in the chat box?
I think we are not providing them, the real innovative tasks for them to remain that focused and attentive. And because I think the more you give them the real sense of innovative work, otherwise they will sort of start becoming disengaged. So that's my point of view. But I think that's a journal from a management standpoint. The understanding of their input maybe not recognized that much, which they're really looking for.
It's interesting, right? So Samir and Wasim, I think they're on the ball here a little bit, talking about purpose, talking about, beyond the bottom line. And this is, I wish, there was, more time, Arshad, and we could do a 3-month class on this topic that some MBA curriculums do, which is talking about transformational leadership, which is in fact talking about how when you are not fulfilled at the work that you're doing. So Shafak, for example, saying management tend to function by crisis as opposed to looking at the long-term goal. And Zulfikar saying people are taking risks to create their own ventures also. Absolutely. Very interesting. The Dubai, the UAE, and Dubai in particular was already a hub of entrepreneurship. I did a call, Arshad, a couple of weeks ago. We had hundreds of people viewing that call. The call was on entrepreneurship. And every single person on that call, one of the comments they made was, I'm either looking at starting my own business, I still have my job and I'm starting to look at doing something on the side, or I want to quit what I'm doing right now and I want to go into business, right? So because Arshad, and this has happened before, the greatest ideas, sometimes the greatest innovation comes from a crisis, right? So World War II resulted in some brilliant technology, right? September 11th, and look at what happened after that, the growth of the markets incurred, and then 2008, the financial crisis we had, and look at the pickup after that. And the same thing's gonna happen again. It's all about where you are going to find yourself. Of course, Wasim, with adversity comes opportunity. In fact, Wasim, I'd say great leaders find the opportunity in every difficulty, and poor managers find the difficulty in every opportunity. Let me repeat that. Great leaders find the opportunity in every difficulty, and poor managers, impoverished managers, find the difficulty in every opportunity. So they walk around trying to prove why things won't work. Let me quickly ask people in the chat box if anybody here read the book The Secret, Bilal, because you just mentioned the word self-actualization, which is a perfect segue. Let me quickly ask you guys, this is, I don't get paid to endorse them, but just to quickly ask you in the chat box, anybody read the book The Secret? Let me actually write it in the chat box as well, because if for nothing else, I'd love for your listeners and the Bahrain ICAP chapter to read, a little bit non-accounting and non-finance related, books as well. So Jenny saying she's read it. Amna says she's read it. Ikra says she's read it. Of course, fantastic work, done about 300-400 years ago and rewritten again by Rhonda Byron in the late 60s. I'll mention the main concept here in a second, Zulfikar. By the way, don't watch the documentary, right? The documentary on YouTube, it's a little bit artificial. So it says if you do this and this, you'll become rich. Trust me, I tried, it doesn't work. So read the book, right? Because the book will tell you about the laws of attraction, right? The laws of attraction. And again, we can spend hours talking about this, but just trust me that your eyes see what you allow them to see. Isn't it true? Actually, how many people have you met, right? You meet them in their careers and all they talk about is a problem with my company and the problem with my boss and the problem with my industry and no new products. And, the market's very tough. What is the difference then? What is the difference between those people who's, perennially, actually, there's some people you meet and there's some companies you engage with where they're in perennial crisis, right? Actually, every time you meet them, there's a crisis, right? They're always in crisis mode, and other companies just keep thriving. They keep doing better and better and so on. What's the difference? Let me ask your listeners, Arshad, and let me ask you, in your opinion, from a leadership perspective, because we're talking about leadership in times of crisis. May I ask you guys in the chat box, one word, if I had to ask you, push you, we've got more than 40 people. I'd love to hear from each of you. Naeed, you're jumping ahead to my question. Fantastic. Let me ask you, what do you think is the difference between those people, those leaders who in times of crisis, when times are tough, the economy is tough, they continue to thrive, their companies stay strong, and they come out of this and then they keep going. And others just cannot survive. And if they survive, that's about the only thing they do. One word then, one word. Let me ask our people in the chat box. Love to hear from each one of you. We've got more than 40 people. I'd love to get 20, 30 responses. What's the difference then? Ashad, what do you think, man? In your experience, what do you think is the biggest difference?
It's the way you actually, I think it's mindset. I think I've been saying this. I think some of them have already said. Naheed has been sort of jumping the gun there. But yeah, I think it's about mindset, how you actually contain yourself and use the mindset at different times to make the difference at this challenging crisis times.
Interesting you say that, right? But if it was that easy, we'd figure it out, right? I mean, look at the answers we're getting: growth mindset and forward looking and leadership and patience and calm. Again, love to hear from all of you. This is the kind of session, guys, Bahrain ICAP, this is how we do the sessions. We keep people engaged. These are not a death by PowerPoint, monotonic webinars where you log in and you kind of go wash your dishes. No. We need your attention here. Naheed saying also the team that you build and motivation and lack of positive energy, Jenny, that's an important word. Look, you've put a lot of ideas there. You've put a lot of good things, and I again don't think there's one secret sauce. I don't think there's one magic bullet, silver bullet. I think it's a collection of all of these things, but one thing is for sure: you will become what you think about. You will become what you talk about most of the time, right? That's what the secret says. That's what the laws of attraction are all about. And people like Richard Branson and Barack Obama and Tony Robbins and Oprah Winfrey and all these gurus who do know a little bit more, perhaps, in their life, at least I do, right? They keep on saying the same thing over and over again, is the language you use, the mindset that you communicate, right? If you're a manager of people, I know we've got some senior managers in this, in our, joining us today on a call as well. I will tell you, your team will be a reflection of you. Over time, your team will become a reflection of you. You talk about things you don't have in your life is full of things you don't have, right? You talk about things you don't have in your life is full of things you don't have. So you start getting stressed out as a manager, you start banging that door, you start sitting down and you start telling your teammates, or you start telling your team that, it's tough and the economy is tough and we're not gonna, who knows if we're gonna make it. And somebody asks you for a raise and you tell them, me too, I'd like a raise. Or, somebody asks them for a promotion, you're like, oh, me too, look at me, when I was your age, right? You start doing that kind of stuff and you create a whirlwind of negativity. Now, and we've got now more than 45 people on the call with us. This is important and critical. If you're a leader or a manager of people, you know this from your own experience, that positivity and negativity is contagious, right? You talk about a pandemic. Right now, there's a pandemic of negativity. That's what we have right now. We've got a pandemic of negativity, right? Everywhere you walk into, people talk about doom and gloom and so on. Be the change you want to see, right? Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. So you want positivity to come to you. Well, guess what you speak about? Guess what you talk about? Do not use deficit-based language, right? Deficit-based language, it won't happen, it can't happen, it'll never happen. Remember the last person who tried to do this, it'll go back to the way it used to be. And so you start using deficit-based language, and that's what comes your way as well. A couple of more things I wanted to mention to you, and I think it'll add value to your call, to your chapter and people who are on this call. Is this idea of resilience and emotional resilience, right? So for many of us, right, for those people who've been working, you mentioned, Arshad, that in Bahrain things haven't opened up as much as they have in the UAE. So many of maybe our friends are still working from home. When you're working from home, you're dealing with work stresses and you're dealing with home stresses, and then everything is just combined. And then, day after day rolls into each other. Many people haven't traveled to see their families because obviously very few people actually have families in the Gulf. Many people are expats who, come here to work. Of course, these things are going to have an impact on their mental wellness and their well-being. But emotional resilience, Arshad, what an important time to understand this concept. Does one bad meeting become another bad meeting? Does a bad day at home, does it become a bad day at the office? Does a bad day at the office become a bad day at home? Do you find yourself going from meeting to meeting, from cycle to cycle, carrying on, that negativity, or are you able to compartmentalize, right? This is what emotional resilience is all about. Shafaq saying, true, crisis gives us an opportunity for reflection and realignment, gives you the chance to step back and think. And my goodness, Shafaq, if we're not going to step back and think now, then when? Right? So let me ask you guys quickly in the chat box. Let me see what you guys say. Arshad, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I know you've attended many of my calls. Let's see if you've actually been listening or not. Quickly in the chat box, let me ask people, when you hear the word emotional intelligence, when you hear the word EQ, emotional quotient, or EI, emotional intelligence, can you please let me know in the chat box, what's one or two words that come to your mind? What are one or two words that come to your mind? Quickly in the chat box, love to hear 15, 20 responses. When you hear the word EI, emotional intelligence, emotional quotient, EQ, what are some of the words that come to your mind? Arshad, what comes to your mind when you hear the word EQ?
No, I'm not going to give away the answer.
that's what a good student does. That's a good student does. In fact, you say,
I'm going to allow others to do that.
You're going to say, that is such a simple question. I'm just going to let somebody else answer that. I love it. I love it, right? Oh, fantastic. Look at these answers coming in. What an engaged ICAP chapter you have in Bahrain. So people talking about empathy and patience and dealing fairly with others and ability to control your emotions. Yassine, I don't think you can control your emotions. You can manage your emotions, right? Nahid saying understanding, choosing, and acting on the emotions. We have self-awareness, strong personality, social skills, social awareness, human thinking. Jenny saying self-awareness. So look, there's 15 underlying areas of EI, right? So there's self-expression, self-appraisal, emotional self-awareness, stress management, empathy, contentment, problem solving. You look at optimism, achievement, drive, all these 15 areas of EI. What I'll mention to you is IQ gets you hired, EQ gets you promoted. What you know got you the job. How you deal with who you know gets you promoted, right? By promoted, I mean that's how people follow you, right? Let me ask you guys a question. I'd love to hear from you. I should love to hear your thoughts on this as well, because I know you're a pretty switched on leader. You try to wear your heart on your sleeve. Let me ask our friends as well who are joining us. Why is it, and I know we've got many people from a finance background, so this is going to be an interesting question to ask them. Why is it you think that most let me ask you this way. In your career, have your managers ever asked you, tell me Arshad, tell me Jenny, tell me Wasim, tell me Hassan, tell me Bilal, have they ever, tell me, how do you feel about what you're doing? Have they ever asked you that question? How do you feel about what you're doing? Or is it mostly, is a project completed, deadline completed, target met? Is that the typical questions you get? Or do you get the, tell me, how do you feel about what you're doing? What do you think, Arshad?
I think not indirectly in that sense, but of course because I think, as you rightly said, I wear my heart in my sleeve, so people see the vision and the dream in the eyes. So do ask the question. So how you're enjoying the journey, enjoying the ride. But yeah, most of the conversations remain at the discussion on the projects, the assignments, and I think you end up not talking about the emotional part. You end up talking about the work most of the time.
Raheel, if you don't mind my asking, Raheel Iqbal, if you can turn off the camera, because on YouTube it looks very, very strange when there's the three of us. So if you can turn off your camera, I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much. My apologies. So for example, so I ask people this question, right? You ask them all the time. You say, so why is it, that most managers find themselves asking the question, tell me, is the deadline completed, project completed? Why do very few people ever ask, how do you feel about what you do? Let me ask you guys in the chat box, why do you think most managers struggle? Why do you think most managers find it difficult to ask their employees, tell me, Muhammad, tell me, Ahmad, how do you feel about the work that you're doing? Why do they hesitate or never ask that question? In the Jenny saying in the mid-year and year-end evaluation reviews, we ask how you feel, but during the course of the year, many of us don't. Wasim saying sense of self-satisfaction, happiness. Just love to hear from others. Love to hear your thoughts, guys. Suresh saying it's the least of a priority to figure out how people are doing. So I kind of care less about how people are doing. I kind of care more about what people are doing, right? So I'd rather focus on what they're doing than how they're doing. What do you guys think? Why is that the reason? Some of you have got lots and lots of experience, different working in large multinationals and accounting firms, and love to hear from you why you think most managers struggle with that. And by the way, please feel free. You've got 30 seconds. If you want to unmute yourself and share your thoughts with us, you can unmute yourself, and 30 seconds, your floor is yours. Let us know why you think most managers struggle to ask that question. Zulfikar saying maybe too busy to ask. Wasim says sense of rejection. Shafak says they themselves are consumed in their system. Chandni says probably they themselves are getting the same from their leaders, and that's how it flows. Chandni's funny, huh? By the way, the number of people you'll meet in your career who will tell you, if one day when I become a manager, then you'll see, right? And you meet them 4 or 5 years later, and they become the same bad manager they complained about. they become the same manager they used to complain about. And Saida says, look, they can open up a Pandora's box, right? Organization's own competencies. So maybe they'll say something like, they're afraid of the answer. So what if somebody says, actually, I hate you, and I hate this department, and I hate this company, right? So better to not ask, right? Better to not ask. So this is, this is where I believe one of the errors in management lies. Now, Arshad, what I'm gonna do is, if you allow me to, I'm gonna write here our YouTube channel link as well, because there's a lot of talks we've given on our YouTube channel. If Munib, you're listening, sorry, is it Munib or who was it? Munib, I think, right? If one of our, yeah. So Munib, if you're listening, if you want to just go and paste the link of our YouTube channel in the chat box as well. I'd love for people to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because every week, every couple of weeks, Arshad, we keep putting content out there which is talking about this exactly, which is how do you lead in times of change? How do you manage yourself in times of change? So I think, Arshad, the answer to that question, the single biggest reason why most employers, most managers find it difficult to ask their people, tell me how do you feel about what you're doing, because many of us have linked emotions to weakness. So managers feel that if I show too much emotion in the workplace, it'll be considered weakness, right? So the easiest thing to do is stick to KPIs and SMART objectives and projects and deadlines, where research after research shows us that the most well-liked managers, the most respected managers, if you want to be in a position where one day people say, I had a great manager once, they changed my life, Shit, it's not going to happen because we had a killer Q3 in 2018. Right? Nobody cares, right? If you had a great Q3 in 2018, nobody cares, right? People in life remember you not for what you do for them. They remember you for how you make them feel. The hippocampus, which is the area of the brain in which long-term memory resides, sits not on the left side of the brain, but on the right side of the brain. Look, Ashad, I wanted to show our friends just a few slides in terms of, some kind of, off the cuff, some ideas that they could use perhaps, in this current time to reflect a little bit on some advice around leadership, right? Leadership in difficult times. I'm going to open that up a little bit.
Just 1 second, Omar. How long it will take? Because we want to take some questions also, because we've got these people who have been very engaging, and they can ask questions, and I think they will be talking about specific topics.
Why don't we do that? What I'll do, let me just go through these slides in about 3 minutes, I promise.
Okay.
And the reason I want to do that is because then these people will have access to this recording as well, because the session is being recorded. So they'll be able to see it after. Quickly, I promise, not to take too long. Look, guys, just some of the kind of rules of thumb, over the past few years, doing this is what we've put together. Let me just take this out of presenter view. And again, this recording will be available for you, that if you want to be able to review this later. So of course, drop the ego, right? We're all learning. If you're a manager right now, if you're not attending these sessions, and if you're not growing and learning, what are you doing right now? Self-reflection. I think somebody mentioned, one of our colleagues in the call mentioned, if now is not the time to self-reflect on who you are as a person, who you are as a leader, then when is the right time? Trust. I mentioned to you trust. I think this is a big conversation to have, which is trust and listening skills. If you're going to build a strong team, trust is key. If not now, then when? Also, I want to talk about creating purpose. I think we already mentioned that. Leaders that create a bigger purpose. So it's not just about completing the project, completing the deadline. They create a bigger purpose beyond the bottom line. What Simon Sinek in one of his calls refers to as the why we do something, the golden circle. Definitely YouTube, the golden circle, very powerful concept. And finally, be a coach, be a mentor. Being a coach doesn't mean you're a good talker. Let me say this, Arshad, you'll enjoy my saying this, that a great coach gets people to do what he or she wants you to do by letting you do things you want to do. Let me repeat that. A great coach gets you to do what they want you to do by letting you do things you want to do. So, right, a great coach is essentially a great listener, and all they do is ask the right questions, even if they don't have the right answers. 7:45 then, on the dot, Arshad, 6:45, Bahrain, of course. So let me ask you, we've got a very engaged audience. Arshad, if you have any questions or our colleagues have any questions, love to take the last maybe 10 minutes or so for any questions, and then over to you, Arshad, to wrap up. So maybe 10 minutes or so if we have any questions. Love to hear from you.
I'll start with a question. So, we hear all these theories and things which have happened elsewhere, and what is the best thing, what best looks like. But what's the first step you think that if things have not changed, you have been doing certain things in a certain way over a period of time, what's the first thing you say that people should think about changing? So I think we've seen all of these, what you said, but I think what's a tip you can give, having worked with a number of organizations and leaders, that step changes, start the change process.
Interesting, right? I read a beautiful saying the other day, Arshad, that says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? You change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change, right? So frankly, I think the answer to that is self-awareness. And I think one of our colleagues hit it on the head, which is the first thing you want to do right now. Look, if you're an accountant, if you're an auditor, all the wonderful, things and, complicated things that you guys do right now, if you're not looking at upskilling yourself in areas, if you're not learning a new language, right? If you're not learning coding, if you're not learning public speaking, right? What a fantastic skill to learn, right? If you're not equipping yourself, Arshad, right now, then I think this is an opportunity lost. So frankly, if you ask me what's the first step, Arshad, I think the first step would be really to upskill yourself, is to upskill yourself in a multifunctional way. So for example, if you're an engineer, then maybe look at other things you want to build. Osama saying, communication skills, right? So that's you could definitely learn this. And of course, again, shamelessly to to peddle our YouTube channel, there's a bunch of webinars on there. We're talking about change management and talking about emotional intelligence and talking about stress management. So definitely, I'd love for you to take up on that. So Rashid, my 2 cents. Upskill yourself. Begin from yourself. When the plane hits turbulence, they say put on your own oxygen masks before you try to help others. So take care of yourself before you look at others. Let's get this comment in from Abdulaziz Khatak saying there's a lack generally of mentorship environment in this region, where ages, companies, and employers have only focused on results rather than their employees. Well, Mr. Abdulaziz, I don't know. So maybe it's a general statement. I agree with what you're saying. I mentioned before that sometimes the human resource is the least valued resource. I cannot agree with you more on that. But I think, sir, mentorship goes both ways. I think many times we're also guilty of not looking for mentors, and we're guilty of not actually giving respect and the time that mentorship deserves, because many people, Abdulaziz, I think they get maybe caught up in the I'm not going to stay in this region forever. I'm going to move on. This is just a means to an end. So I'll quickly do what I need to do and then move on, right? So again, these are important things to think about. Mohammed Zulfikar saying, is it recommended to be a missing person, to learn, focus on upskilling, or we should manage while learning other important skills for current change due to the pandemic? Zulfikar, I didn't understand your question, but let me get the drift of it. If you're asking, do we need to abandon what we do right now? Oh yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. Okay, so you're saying you kind of just abandon what we're doing right now and just solely focus on upskilling ourselves. That's an interesting thing, right? Actually, if you remember back in the day, right, people used to say, I want to get that MBA, right? And they used to take a couple of years off, right? And they used to go get an MBA. And by the time they used to come back, they realized that everything they'd learned doesn't matter anyway because the world's moved on, right? Now you've got these EMBAs and executive MBAs where you kind of do things in the evening and so on, for sure. And again, I hate to say this, that I'm not a big fan of just formal education, right? I know it helps. I know having a nice degree, Arshad, like yourself, a nice big diploma sitting nicely on your beautiful office in Bahrain. I know these things help, and I know formal education still helps. But Arshad, there's a whole world out there of informal education, like Abdulaziz said, of mentorship, of coaching, of growth, right? I strongly recommend the people who are on this call, please feel free to reach out to Arshad, and please feel free to reach out to us at Gadlang, a management consultancy, and think about this idea of coaching and getting yourself a coach, just like you would get yourself a coach when you would, play sports, right? Just like you would get yourself a coach when you go to the gym, for example, you will see the results. I'm not saying, get yourself a life coach, but definitely a business coach, somebody who can help you. So somebody's saying the most successful people I've mentored who seek mentorship is to widen their horizons. Mentorship is a two-way street. Of course, I cannot agree with you more. Arshad, I am getting some questions, people asking me privately. I don't know if you guys can see it. By the way, guys, if you are typing something, just please make sure there's a little kind of icon there which says send a message to everyone so everyone can see it. Again, thank you to those of you who are sending your compliments privately as well. Thank you, means a lot to me. Wasim Khan saying, do you see any common traits among leaders? And Saeeda saying, Steve Jobs had 4 coaches at one time. Of course, Saeeda, because he could afford it. But, I see your point, Saeeda. Yeah, of course, get some help and get some support. Wasim, again, I'm also learning as well. I've been doing this for 13 years. And I think every year I actually try to learn more than I teach, because listening is not learning and talking is not teaching. So I'm also on this journey. But I think there's not a common trait. I think there's one thing, I think that's a non-negotiable as a leader. And I've said it before, it's attitude. I think attitude is non-negotiable as a leader. Waking up every morning, being the ability to give positivity to others, even though you're not positive yourself, even though you don't feel great yourself, right? So Zulfikar is saying how to remain positive all the time by Helena. I love to tell you, Zulfikar, there's an easy answer to that. I mean, different things work for different people. For some people, it's, going to the gym. Some people, it's kind of, working with a great team. But generally, I'd say to you that if you've kind of discovered your passion, if you've kind of, and it shows, Arshad, right? When people love what they do, isn't it true, Arshad? You've coached and mentored hundreds of people, Arshad, in your career. Arshad, that when somebody's passionate about what they're doing and they're fired up, right, then they have a completely different perspective than others. Would you agree to that, Arshad?
Yeah, definitely. I think that just definitely adds on. I think you definitely should keep finding. I get a lot of people approaching me. We just want to do a job and just want to get on this corporate ladder. But I said you just need to find what we really, really, really like. Then I think the whole life will become fun for you. You will remain, as you said, positive. I think Zulfikar's answer is exactly that. You just need to find what you really enjoy doing. And I'm telling you, and I think people have said this multiple times before, and that will eventually make you money also if you continue to pursue what you really enjoy doing.
But that's the thing, actually. That's the thing. $1 million point here, I want to emphasize, right? You're not just talking about likability, right? So you're not saying, I like doing something. Yeah, I like sitting on my couch watching cricket all day, but it doesn't make you money, right? But so there's a difference between, Arshad, likability and passion, right? Passion means I'll wake up in the middle of the night, I'll do whatever I need to do to get this particular thing done. And again, Arshad, sometimes entrepreneurs like yourself and successful entrepreneurs like yourself, sometimes you'll make a comment and you'll say, well, people want to get a job. Again, I want to emphasize again, there's nothing wrong with being a very good corporate athlete, with being a very good corporate person. For years, Arshad, that's how you built your base, and how many successful entrepreneurs learned about business while working in a great organization such as you did. But I guess whether you like it or not, and I know it's slightly controversial what I'm going to say, but your own growth patterns are typically restricted in a very, bureaucratic kind of a setup that most organizations have, right? So you've got to stay on the ladder, and unfortunately, even if you are the best at what you do, you got to wait for others to, clear, get out of your way before you can climb up. So again, I'm generalizing hugely, and I know it's a bit controversial what I say, but if you're passionate about what you do and you're talented at what you do, remember those magic words, guys, before we wrap up our call today. Remember these magic words. If you're passionate about something and you're talented, right? A passion by itself won't do much, right? Like I'm passionate about cricket, I can't play. So no. So if you're passionate about something and you're good at it, what a tragedy, Arshad, then if you don't have the opportunity, or if you don't give yourself the opportunity to do that for a living. All right, what a tragedy.
I think it
It's,
would be really good, Umar, if you can just give that example, which you always do, about regrets. I think that might take another 4 to 5 minutes, but I think that's such a fantastic thing you've said that, and I would remember this always. So please, I think that would help others.
yeah, so let's wrap up on that, and then again, Abdulaziz, I promise before we wrap up, I'll mention 2 or 3 books that I recommend reading. So no, it was a few years ago, Aisha, that they did a survey in palliative care units. So remember, guys, palliative care, right? So this is like a hospital, a ward in the hospital where it's like pain management and people who essentially who are dying, and they did a survey in 26 palliative care units around the world. And they asked people who were, ill or unfortunately on their way out, and they asked them, "What's your biggest regret in life?" Right? And it's funny, right? You got many different answers, and generally the top 3, Arshad, was number 3. People said, "I wish I'd spend more time with my loved ones." So that was number 3, right? I wish I'd spend more time with my loved ones. And number 2 was religion, believe it or not, because when the plane hits turbulence, we all become a little bit more religious. We all become a little bit more religious, right? Ya Allah, the plane lands and you're okay again. But it's interesting, right? The number one thing, right? The number one thing people said, my biggest regret, they said, and I hope people on our call, you remember this, and I hope, God forbid, it doesn't become your regret, is they said, "I wish I'd taken more risk. And I wish I started that project I wanted to start. And I wish I started that business I wanted to start, right? Or I wish I would have asked her to marry me. Or I would have, I was so busy living my life with the fear of failure that I never did the things that I wanted to do. And hopefully I should in the future, we'll get another opportunity to speak to this fantastic, brilliant, engaged audience you have, and talk to them about fears and about fear management. Because remember, Arshad, the fear of failure is not something we were born with. It's something we learned. The good news is, because we learned it, we can unlearn it, right? Right? This is not an innate fear. We were not born with it. We learned it. So definitely a big topic there as well. Die empty, Wasim, of course. Something to think about. Let me just quickly mention in the chat box, of course, the Audacity of Hope by Barack Obama, a great little book for those of you kind of interested in positivity and so on. My apologies for my spelling. Oh, wait, I'm not typing it the right place. Let me just write down the Audacity of Hope by Barack Obama. There is a great book by the Greenleaf Institute, which talks about grit. It's actually not a book; it's a research which talks about. It's called the Grit Factor, which Oprah Winfrey made very famous. Our Iceberg is Melting, of course, a great little book talking about change and change management. And then I'd say Blink, a great little book as well. Blink, which talks about speed of change and how quickly change. Basically it says change or you will be changed. Change or you will be changed. And one final time, I guess, again, if you do, guys, if personal development is something you're interested in, please do make sure you check out the YouTube channel and make sure you subscribe to it, because we've got weekly or bi-weekly calls happening where we discuss leadership and we talk about Multipliers, of course, Wasim, absolutely a great book. Multipliers as well. So great books, and of course, personal development is something which is a journey. Remember, guys, personal development is a journey, not a destination. It's a journey, not a destination. On that note, Arshad Gaddar, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to have a quick chat with your Bahrain ICAP chapter. And let me congratulate you on the success you're having and your chapter is having. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And what can I say? I've seen so many comments appreciating this piece of wisdom and the advices you have been given. And I saw Nahid is writing that she does 3 things every day she would look out for, and then she is going to write it down that she has attended this session. So you are becoming a memory of people also, Omar. And a fantastic session. We wanted to bring you down here, and you remember that time just before pandemic,
Yeah.
we booked Wyndham Grand for you. It's a grand place, and
I know,
we
I've been there. I've been there.
yes.
And I can't wait to come next time so I can get you to take me to Chase Cafe and I can have that avocado, special avocado. That's what I want to have.
While I have shisha, yeah. So and definitely, we wanted to bring you down here. Inshallah, when the restriction
Inshallah.
eases up, we will bring you here, and inshallah, we'll have another session, perhaps at a different topic. But loved hearing you, ICAP members and others who have joined. I know Samir from Miami was also missing the beach and then listening to you was
Fantastic.
here also, and many more have been attending. So thank you very much. Thank you, members, and we will close the session now. But any comments, any feedback, any more sessions like these, if you want to have, please contact me or the rest of the managing committee. On the behalf of managing committee, Umar, I'm really, really thankful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Take care, guys. Bye-bye. We can all leave, guys. Thank you very much. I think the YouTube session, Munib, you can turn off somehow, and we can close the session here.
Yes, I will do. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for attending. Great participation. Thank you, Munib, for organizing, sir.